Okay, so I've just been scrolling through this book that I found, The History of Kendall County. Like I did initially in the other video. There's a lot more I found out. So as I search things in here, it isn't perfect, so it makes it difficult to search stuff. So even like putting in Joseph Smith, even though it's in the book many times, when I hit search for Joseph Smith, like nothing comes up. So it's not totally perfect, but here is, I'm going to show you the title page. So this is linked on my website now, officially. Things are just moving slow. A few of these are blank pages. There we go. Oh, this is really bad now. It's a really slow load. History of Kendall County, Illinois, earliest discoveries to the present time. So it's super fascinating. It's a Reverend Higgs. So Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints, we don't use that. So that's someone who's not LDS. Semi-critical of the church, but then gives a lot of, sounds respectful of the reorganized church. And I think Joseph Smith III just was such a nice guy. I think he got along with people he said that he had friends that were Methodists and of other religions. So it's 1877. But I'm going to take that off. So I have to put in Mormon to pull up information, but you can, that my picture that I think is Joseph Smith that is published in the scientific journal. It's the only alleged photo that has been so far published in a real peer-reviewed scientific journal by forensic anthropologists. So Plano, Kendall County was 10 miles away from Newark, Kendall County, Illinois, where my picture was printed by J.S. Bibbins. And so we can find, this is just another reference showing that Joseph Smith III lived here. Is interesting. There was a William that was a known Mormon. So I was researching William and all that. Trying to remember what all I was looking at the railroad. Okay. So they talk about the Mormon church. We don't really go by that anymore. We try to avoid, because that's not the name of our church. There we go. So we're looking at page 298. Okay, so it looks pretty accurate. They talk about the RLDS church being in Plano. And they talk about very specifically that the first organization was in Amboy in 1860. Okay, and then, but he's been for 10 years, so this is 1877. They're saying for 10 years. It was really 1866. This is probably written in 1876, so that would be accurate, I think. Past resided in Plano, Kendall County, Illinois. So that's not far. So if we look up, this is where my picture is printed. This is Newark, Illinois. It's in Kendall County. There's Plano. Joseph Smith III talks about Sandwich. There's a city called Norway. Bertha was Norwegian. She was born, I think, in LaSalle. I don't know. She grew up in Kendall County, but both her parents were born in Norway. So we've got Ottawa. So as Joseph Smith III talks about his first mission, he says that he was like a little bit south, like a few miles, not far from Millington, is like right here. And then he just starts talking about LaSalle and Ottawa. Like, wait, you were here, but you were also here? I don't know. It's like this whole area. So like he probably went through Newark. But he describes being right outside of Millington. Is he outside Millington there or there? But brother Rogers had a farm together. Anyway, but then he moved here in 18. So that this is like October 1860. Then January 1866 he moves here. Um, there is a city called Little Rock, um, but then there's a township called Little Rock, and then there's a township called Big Grove, and then there's Kendall County. I explained that. I'm not going to explain it right now. It's confusing, but there's townships, counties, and then like the village of, anyway. And then Bibbins, you can look through here and see Elisha Bibbins is talked about being, a reverend and also working, and he was in politics. And then JS, the person who printed my picture, they were considered scholars. And he's included in a chapter about the Underground Railroad. I was trying to read through that a little bit more today. I don't find directly that, so they're talking about the Methodist. So his brother, R. K. Bibbins, also became a Methodist preacher. JS didn't. He was an artist, photographer, ran a store, and I guess a scholar and a teacher. So there's the Newark Church. There it says Robert Bibbins. I know I've seen that. And then Elisha Bibbins was a teacher, so there's Elisha. And then this is page 211 that we've got J.S. Bibbins. So I just realized on my website when I link it, it's not going directly to the page. So that's frustrating and unfortunate. So I might just do a screenshot, but they talk about J.S. Bibbins being a settler in 1840, born in 1821. He's not even quite an adult, but he went with his whole family. So it's interesting. He's like the first name. So I'm like, wow, he's like well regarded. He's the first name listed. And his father was extremely well respected as I'm looking through this. Just all of their accomplishments were really, really great. So we're just going through the same stuff at this point. Okay, then we've got Joseph Smith III. So they're all in the same book. So it's just a good other reference other than me using this a lot, which wasn't like we couldn't use that in our book, even though I know it's legitimate. I don't think the guy did a bad job, but it is just a website. And so that guy has access to all these original records, but it wasn't like he had the funds or the ability to like scan all the newspapers. So instead he like hand typed all these newspapers from Kendall County and all these death certificates, and just he went through everything. That was, you can just see the top of the page, genealogy related for Kendall County. And so he had the website up from 1997 to 2018. And so on their website, they do talk about, the Saints Herald, Latter-day Saints Herald, and it got shortened to the Saints Herald, though. As you'll see. But here's all this. If you go there, you can see a lot of information. But this is a good, it's an 1877 book. So this could be used as a reference in a scientific paper or whatever. So, or just a book or whatever. But here they talk about church. There's a William that was a Mormon preacher. And then he tries to talk about his perspective of our church history, which was not very nice, but whatever. But there you can see the reorganization, explaining it was in Plano. And this is a Kendall County book, and he's also talking about, right? So here you can see there's Plano. Newark's like right there. There's Nauvoo. So they're explaining, I think, did I explain that? I have brain fog. What have I already said? So Joseph Smith III lived here, visited. Oh, there's a better map that shows all those little areas. There's a map. I should have just gotten a map of actual. Anyway. But yeah, you can just read all the sources. I'll just explain it. He was 4.5 miles south and right outside of Millington. So, like, was he here? Was he there? In 1860 and 1866, he's there. And so this page helps explain that. There's my own boy and saying, well, he's been here about 10 years. Well, this is published in 1877, so he came in 1866. And then a lot of it actually is pretty respectful of him. So, and then we've got the train tracks that I talk about the railroad. They talk about it going through Newark. There might have been other railroads, but I know that there is a railroad that goes from now Nauvoo, but the city that Emma talked about in her letters. So you can see she's talking about visiting in August 1866, coming to Plano. So that's August, and then I guess I don't quote the October 11th. I may as well, though. I should put that in there. But she talks about she's looking for a photo card trying to get her shadow taken October 22nd. Trying to get a negative. And she goes into, oh, I may not have put it on here, actually. Did I? Let me just skim through it. There's David Hiram Smith writing, thanking her for coming. But then I did find in someone's book that they knew that David Hiram and Emma went to Plano in 1869, but she was talking about going in 1866. So 1866, if she went and was talking about getting a negative copied, looking for a photo card to get her negative taken, she's trying to get a photo copied in 1866. Well, my picture is missing a sun stamp. And so I explain how that time frame works really good. And so on my main page, I have a link to that talking about that, but the sun stamps, meaning that there is no stamp on the back of here. So if you go back over here, I can just sun stamp, space. There's that. So you see most of Bibbin's, his work that I found, and it says photographer. You can tell that the lighting, the background, everything's totally different than my picture. And just the oval, the lack of detail are all the reasons why it's to Gowan Weaver. Like, this is a copy. This is definitely a copy. So he concluded that, wrote that, and he thinks it's a copy of a daguerreotype or an ambrotype, but a daguerreotype makes sense. And so here you can see that this ended in August 1866. I've talked about that many times, but that's important. So he brought that up. So again, I always have to keep giving credit to Gowan Weaver. He's like, I'm thinking it's late 1860s because of the lack of the sun stamp. It unfroze. This starts to happen when I think someone's like hacking my computer. I didn't click on that. So I'll probably end this pretty soon and turn the internet off. But I've let some people know that I don't want them to contact me anymore. So I'm not surprised. But yeah, there are people I really, really don't trust right now. Yeah, it's just, I'm not even touching anything. Because I know that is because it's slow. I don't know, you guys. But there you go, August 1866. It came up. That's great. That's when it ended, and there's no sun stamp. So it was required. August 1866 is no longer required. You go back to here, go back to Emma's letters. That's when she's talking about coming, right? So if she came around the time that she's talking about getting a negative taken, and if that maybe she could have had an actual negative of a paper photograph of Joseph Smith, that I think that could still come out, though he often came out softer and lighter than daguerreotypes and less detailed. That's my opinion. Godwin Weaver thinks it was a daguerreotype. That was without him knowing that everyone was talking about there being a daguerreotype of Joseph Smith. And I had talked to him on the phone. I'm like, well, it could, he knew that I was passionate believing that it was from a negative and always a paper photograph because it's in the correct perspective. But then he let me know that there are daguerreotype reversing prisms that can be put on the daguerreotype camera that put it in the correct perspective, or a daguerreotype of a daguerreotype, which I'm going to look up here. There we go. I'm using Control F on my own. I've just had a really bad headache today, so my brain's a little. I already did that. I did that once. I just don't want to make the same thing over and over, but there's a William Smith right there. Okay, so it's very clear that there was a daguerreotype of a daguerreotype. So you got a William A. Smith who's selling pictures in Iowa right there. And then there's this quote. This is thanks to Locke Mackay, but I researched these things, but I need to work harder and see if I can find the original sources so I can link it and then read it. It talks about a William A. Smith, which was interesting because there's a William Smith that's listed underneath J.S. Bibbins, and then there was a William Smith that was like a preacher in Newark, Illinois. I don't know who is, but it was a William A. Smith. The brother of Joseph Smith was William B. Smith, I believe. Did I write it down? I'm sure I double checked and wrote it down, but William H. Smith. Yeah, in that book, and then it didn't link the page. But anyway, in 1875, they talk about how their friend Mr. Christ Smith of Sonora called to see us last Saturday and presented us with a daguerreotype of Joseph and Hiram Smith. He stated that while on his visit in Iowa, it's in Iowa, he found the original likeness, it would have been daguerreotype, and with permission of the owner, had one copied, which in 1852 was a daguerreotype of a daguerreotype. Unless they did photography, but it really wasn't popular until the 1860s. But it existed. It was just popular in England, but then you have an overabundance of people, most of the members of the church, I think they, I think they most of the members of the church, I think, were directly from England by 1840s, outnumbering the people that were, you know, American with ancestors that came over on the Mayflower, like Joseph Smith, my ancestors, Emma's ancestors. So most Utahns I meet, they just get really excited and talk about their ancestors from England. So it was, the population boomed of the church from England. But they could have brought paper photography at that point because Henry Fox Talbot patented it in 1841. So the year Joseph Smith died, he published a reprints of his books of paper photography because he invented negatives. So all of his photography was in the correct perspective in 1844. Look him up. I used to talk extensively and talk about him on and on because I really thought my picture's in the correct perspective because it matches the death mask in the correct perspective. And hey, if you're ever going to argue with me about the hairline, I think that's why another reason I'm like, I don't want to argue about the hairline anymore. Like, I just don't want to waste my time, right? I talk to another person and just like, well, you need to accept criticism. You need to like talk to other people. I'm like, yeah, I took comments off. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, comments are a horrible place. Like if you're sitting talking to someone, you can talk with stuff, see their face, see their intonation, see what they mean. You don't get that from a comment, right? You can't tell if someone's mad. You can't tell talking to someone face to face. Oh, that'd be great. Or even on the phone. It's really great. I talked to Shannon Tracy, and I won't say what we talked about, but I really don't think that Dr. Van de Graaff was misquoted. I'll just say that. Um, all these weird accusations that these people didn't really think that the skulls were switched. I'm like, I was able to verify that, and I've talked to other people too. Like those men put their own, it's their own words. It's in the back of both books, In Search of Joseph and Millions Shall Know Brother Joseph Again. I'm like, hey, I can't find any evidence that he was mad and said, "Oh, I didn't say that." It's his signatures on it saying the most startling thing is that the skulls were switched, like they were misidentified. And then you've got that whole group who killed Joseph Smith. They got really excited because they were reading Curtis's paper, trying to explain that broken maxilla and how that could have been from a bullet. And Dr. Herod says no, it's from a shovel, probably. Like he doesn't. It's Joseph's skull. See, Hiram's skull doesn't have any nasal bones. So I was just kind of clicked through and re-listened to that guy that spearheaded that movie and his theories and getting all excited. He's like, but it's the only thing that explains how Joseph's that or Hiram's nose is all intact. Hiram's skull is he's missing all the facial bones. I've given my theories. I'm not going to go into that right now, but I yeah, it all makes sense with the missing facial bones. And the bullet didn't. If it went through his brain, he probably couldn't have talked. And so I have some theories on the pathway of the bullet with Hiram, but it makes even more sense of someone explaining him being at the door standing and just having his head turned, like literally being right-handed, having his right cheek facing the door because he was shooting out the door, is what the witnesses said. Hiram was shooting, trying to protect his little brother from being killed. He didn't want his brother to be killed. It's self-defense. I think he got shot in the right cheek. So there's this perfect circular hole. Often entrance wounds were really small. That kept coming to my mind a long time ago, and now I'm going into it. And the exit wound is always really large. I looked it up once, and it was like, it looks exactly like what you can see, the shape of just the mangled skin. What's happening with Hiram, and that's not from the cotton. Like the skin is mangled. It's a really bad wound. It's an exit wound. The door was open. He's shooting out the door. Like how would he be shooting if the door was closed and his face was against it and they're trying to keep it closed? Unless he has it just blindly out the door, but I think they'd already pushed the door open. Like a bullet went through there, they jumped back, then they went back and Hiram's in front of the door shooting. Like the door is like open, the men are in, they are trying to get the rifles away with their walking canes. The Hiram just gave his life for his brother. He just stood right in the front of the door. And they shot him in the cheek, but then they shot him in many other places. So, yeah. And then they shot him again. So that was stated. I think John Taylor, after read his account. I've read his account and read Willard Richards many, many times. And you need to look at Frederick Piercy's artwork from about 1852. Listen to Joseph F.'s statements. Things changed in Carthage jail since the martyrdom happened. There used to be a blood stain on the floor that was left there from Joseph F. Smith's father, Hiram. And he went there for the first time after going on his mission and just sat there and bawled. And then when Frederick Piercy went, in 1852, he sketched the walls, he sketched the interior. He drew it. And he drew bullet holes on the wall, the side of the wall that where the door is, and the ceiling. So bullet holes littered the ceiling and the wall. I think it was John Hatchitek that was like, there are no bullet holes on the ceiling or the wall or on the outside. If they didn't plaster it, the wall would have fallen down. They kept the hole in the door. That was about it. The bloodstains gone. That was talked about by Joseph F. Smith. The bullet holes are gone. But Frederick Piercy saw them on the wall, littering the whole wall of the ceiling. So you can look up Frederick Piercy. This was just on my mind. From Liverpool. I think I remember the name of it. Liverpool. You can go there. Can I search? Look up Carthage. These are highlighted. Does that include the word Carthage? Oh. Yeah, this is even harder to search stuff. It did. It went, so it's right out here. So I'll just go a few pages. Gosh, I hate that everything's so slow. Okay, there's the Nauvoo temple that people started stealing everything till everything was gone. Then he went to Nauvoo, lodged in the Nauvoo Mansion House. This is this is Frederick Piercy. Sketched Joseph F. Smith, David Hiram. David Hiram was really happy drawing, and here's this artist. I just think that he really bonded. Like, I think because of the date and the style, I need to research more, but I think that that picture was on that page. I wonder if Frederick Piercy did do this, because it shows the striped vest. Striped vest doesn't look exactly the same, but could have been from memory. Really high cheekbones. Sort of similar looking background, just sort of that wavy background, but there is a line going through right there. There's a line right there. Wonder how it would have looked when it was a daguerreotype. Of course, he has a little more hair, but he still has an extremely high forehead, and it's still receded. You can see it's receded really far on this side, but then this side's a little bit more normal, so it's more flipped. Get my drift? But anyway. Yeah, the 1882 is what they give for this. So you can go to that. Oliver Cowdery, he's, found a lot of interesting stuff. But yeah, his artwork going to Carthage. I'll just show you that. I'll just end with that. Just have to scroll through here. I wish it went faster. It never does. It actually never does go very fast. Okay, now he's talking about Carthage. So I'll be there in, maybe 5 more minutes. Oh my goodness. I don't want to click that too many times. So he's talking about going to the jail. It's going to pop up in a second here. So here's his story, and then there's a whole like church history written here, probably commissioned by Brigham Young. So on the top is, you know, what Frederick Piercy's notating with his artwork, and then he didn't, you know. So he's copying Maudsley's artwork right there. But I think going along with my theory with Frederick Piercy, oh yeah, because he did the one where he's like in court and his hair just looks shaped the same as mine. He has a pop down collar, black tie, and that darker upper. Well, then where are the pictures of Carthage? Sorry, guys. The little the point of my video. There we go. Here's one picture of Carthage. I actually saved these, but I'll just screenshot them again just so I don't have to ever go through them. Hopefully. I know I've probably done that before already, but that's one sketch. He's a really good artist. I just am curious and wonder if Emma showed the daguerreotype and said, but please don't copy it. Please don't tell anyone about the daguerreotype. You know, because she just didn't want people are taking so many things from her whole life, being married to Joseph Smith and losing him. You know, she lost his time and presence to the church as well. She would not want to lose that daguerreotype. You know, until we could realize they could be copied. You know, I would imagine her being like, oh, I want to give a copy to his sister and his other sister, you know, because Lucy and Catherine were still alive, I think, in the 1860s. Because, yeah, Joseph III stayed with Lucy, little Lucy, when he was coming back in 1860, so she was still alive then. So I've wondered maybe he brought it with him in 1860, so there's just so many what ifs. Okay, maybe I exaggerated, but you can see dozens. Well, no, yeah, there's a lot. So, yeah, that's a bullet. That looks like a hole. That looks like a hole. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. And then on the opposite side is a window. They're trying to, that's where Joseph fell out. And you can see all the walls are just in terrible shape. Looking at the floor, you know, as far as I've seen the floor, it didn't still have the blood stains. Obviously, they just had to fix everything. So they did. But I think there's a bullet hole in the ceiling. That's why I said that. Because it's cracked. So there must have been some bullet holes that hit the ceiling and hit the wall. But if you look today, it's going to look quite different. A room in which Joseph and Hiram Smith were imprisoned. And so Frederick Piercy, you know, shows these bullet holes coming from over there. And so someone's like, oh, there would be bullet holes right here and here. There's not. Like, well, there were. You can just see that this is trashed and falling apart. So eventually it was fixed up. But in 1852 it wasn't. But by now it doesn't look like this anymore. So well, against which Joseph Smith was placed and shot at after his assassination. And you see Frederick Piercy. And there's the well, so he was placed up against that. And so that was what witnesses said. So that's the story he was told. So he was very young at this point in 1852. And he was in England. This all happened, but this fence is falling down. Just this whole jail is just in horrible shape in 1852. But if we look up Carthage jail today, can see pictures of it. You see that there is a window right there, and then the opposite way over there is where the door is. So there's the outside, that's the front, there's the well. There is a window right there. Right, there's the window. So there was a window right there, and there are bullet holes there, there, littering everything. There's also, um, a fence. And if you look at the other pictures, you can see outside of it that there's like a tree. Where'd it go? There's that. Okay, I think it was. Yeah, so he really felt like he had to draw and sketch. There we go. And so there are some trees. There's just different objects they could have climbed as well for the Carthage Greys to have done to help. They initially had blanks when they were out there, but they're, according to other witnesses, they were stationed out here to shoot in through the window. They could have sat on a horse. They could have easily, it's just only the second story. They also could have made themselves taller, standing on something. And there were trees. I mean, it hadn't been 10 years. And so it was falling apart, but imagine if the walls are cracking. So the walls are cracking, of course, they're going to plaster them and fix it, since so many people want to visit, and then, they start making money. I don't know the history of who owned it to what, but there's a crack there, there's a hole there, there's a crack there, crack. It's just really, really bad shape. And then when Joseph F. Smith came around the same time, there was a blood stain, but like you're not gonna see anything like that now in there. And there's a virtual tour. There we go. So I had clicked on it, and I could just do a tour. Let me see. So those are actual tours. But anyway, I used to be able to go through and just see all the in great detail the whole jail, but I don't know why I don't see it anymore. But things change. So websites change, permissions change. But I mean, obviously, right now the church owns it. And so if you look at, it used to be like you could literally walk through it, you know? You could virtually look around and look at the ceiling and zoom in, and it was really neat. But I don't see the link right now. But obviously, it's in much, much better shape. And even this is fixed, that's fixed. So many things were really falling apart. But I mean, you have to fix things so that, it doesn't all crumble. But yeah, you don't see any bullet holes. I don't know. Maybe there is still a blood stain on the ground. I don't know. I couldn't really see one when I last looked, though. So, but yeah, I'll just end the video here, and I just will spend more time researching this and this whole book. It's a really good source. On top of this, I've often gone here, but now a lot of the things that I said there are verified in here because it's so detailed. But this guy is just, well, he knows all of the newspapers, and he really, I mean, that's 2 decades of him working on anything having to do with Kendall County, especially way back when. So, all these newspapers. Okay, but y'all end this though. But have a good day.